less fun, but
Yeah,
still
yeah.
about Ben Brode. Segue.
Yep.
But because there's some really cool things to look at with this.
Yeah.
I'll make sure that, you know, whether it's on the YouTube video, whether it's on the podcast, like links to all of these things that we look at, I will have available. So you can take a look
Yeah.
at the Discord post, you can take a look at the Marvel Snap tweet, and you can take a look at the video of the speech that was given at Unity for the GDC. I think I said that backwards, but
Yeah.
whatever.
It's
So
yeah, the Game
you know what I meant.
Developer Conference GDC
Right. You know what I meant.
based
I said
around
it
the
backwards, but
Unity.
you know,
Yeah, yeah.
it's a
I
broken
gotcha.
intro,
I
but you
gotcha.
know, shit happens. But I I watched it. I know you did too. It's
Mhm.
an hour-long presentation of them presenting how they created Marvel Snap.
Yep.
And I'll say confidently, it's a PowerPoint presentation. But if you like Marvel Snap, it's a
Yeah.
really cool watch. So what I did was went ahead and screenshot some of the really cool images for
Mhm.
what they did. So if you're on the YouTube side of things, you're about to see them. Otherwise, I'll explain some of the things that they showcased in this giant presentation. They were showing kind of
Yeah.
like the whole road to how they got to global launch and launching it with a main core group of only 50 people, and how they
Yeah.
worked with their different partners, and that how it all started on Ben Brode's business cards, and you know, getting the
Mhm.
idea of they want to
Mhm.
do a Marvel IP. And I gotta say, you know, because I'm leaving the cards here on screen for the video, the initial cards, but I did find it not surprising, but still interesting with my Disney background, that they did not speak any part whatsoever about the relationship with Disney and how they obtained the Marvel IP. They did not talk about it at all. The only thing they said in regards to Disney in the entire presentation was after their first phase of conception and they got it to a digital client. At that point, they said one phrase along the lines of, and then we heard back from Disney and got approval from Marvel for the IP. And that was
Yeah.
it. And I just found that, yeah, again, for those who do not know,
Yeah.
I used to work at Disney for many years in guest relations, also behind the scenes in backstage tours. I'm a Disney nerd in any and all ways, shapes, and forms. I've been on the PR side also. So knowing what was said and what wasn't said for me is really fun because I
Yeah.
know what they basically had to get approved by Disney to even say at that speech, which was
Yeah. Which
probably that one sentence verbatim.
right, which I also think when you look at that type of stuff, yes, Disney is the overarching part of that, but with a lot of this IP, I bet you a lot of it was held closer to the comics division of Marvel, the art division of Marvel. Yes, Disney has to have the final say, but they were
Yeah.
probably working a lot with directly with Marvel, which is why we didn't hear too much. But I just want to talk about this real quick, right? So here's the thing. I've been playing card games, and I've prefaced this on streams before, and even probably the last podcast. But I've been playing card games for over 20 years. So back when I was in elementary school, I was playing Magic the Gathering. And if you are a person who has played any type of card game back in elementary school and middle school, you have tried to create your own card game. It's just a fact. You've looked at Magic, you've looked at Pokemon, you've looked at these card games and said, I can do that. That's easy. But here's the thing, it's not. Because everything you do, you continually look back at Magic or whatever card game you play, and your mechanics look so similar to their mechanics. And the difficulty is a lot of those mechanics are actually copyrighted by these games. And so when Ben Brode was looking at this, and for people that don't know, the two founding creators of Snap came from Hearthstone, and they were the creators of Hearthstone. And
Yeah.
so when they came here, they also had to make sure they weren't copying Hearthstone or giant lawsuits and things like that. So it is fun to see how they took this from, like you're seeing on screen here, like notes on a piece of paper into the digital game that we see, because there's a lot of iterations they talk about. There's a lot of these mechanics they had to work through. And it's not just something where you're just going to go, hey, I want to build a card game, and you build it in 2 or 3 weeks, right? It takes a
Yeah.
lot of testing, a lot of perfecting. And that's what I really enjoyed about these speeches is when he was going through that and they were talking about it. It was just like, hey, we did this iteration, we didn't like it. We did it vertical, we did it horizontal, we did it 9 cards instead of 4 cards. Like they
Yeah.
really went through all these different pieces, and it wasn't just mechanics. Like what I found really interesting was the art and how much the art
Yeah.
dictated, because this is Marvel Comics, it's all about the art. The art dictated a lot of their choices going back to that 9 cards over 4. They said that once they got up to 9 cards on a location, you couldn't see the art on the cards. So what's the point of 9 cards on the location, which brought them
Yeah.
back down to 4? So I just loved listening to them and just the little nuances that you never think about in that go into a game, and how they kind of like were like, hey, even when it was only 4 or 5 of us, we were noticing that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Is really, really cool. Other little things that I loved noticing in the very early conceptions of the game is also
Mhm.
how much of it made it to the final version
Yeah.
from these little individual cards. Like on the screen, we see Mojo World, the sewer system, Nightcrawler, Ant-Man, like so
Mhm.
many of these cards that obviously we already know and love, and almost all of what I just said, the mechanics, the cost, and the power are all exactly what they currently are in the game. Like
Yeah.
the core idea was so strong from the very beginning that as it evolved, it held its weight. So sure, some of the characters, like the Captain America one is dead on. 3 cost, 3 power, and it says your other cards at this location have +1 power. Like it's dead on exact. But I'm curious, and they never mentioned it, is what
I may
else
have
is
an
in
I
one
may
of
have an
these.
answer.
Yeah,
I
good.
may have an
Uh,
answer if you keep going.
I'm pretty sure you do because of your background. One of the other things that I see on the screen in this early card version of this is something that didn't make it to the final version of the game, which is they have a 10-sided die. And I think I know why also, but I'm curious if a dice mechanic was implemented into this game, how would it have been implemented potentially?
Okay, so not what I was thinking you were going with, but that's fine. So
Oh,
they
okay.
did say during the speech that originally what they were looking at was the die was the energy each turn, which means
Okay.
they probably didn't
That's where
have a
I was
lot of
at.
cards. Yeah, that probably didn't have a lot of cards that added energy or removed energy to make sides different. If you think of cards like Electro and things like that,
I mean,
if they were
Psylocke's
using
on
one
screen.
die. Well, yeah, I guess, but
Yeah.
like I'm just saying, if they had just the generic die there, the
Yeah,
turn
yeah, yeah.
die, energy die, um, but I mean, there's definitely if you look at Magic, right? Like, Magic has a lot of um, dice that you would use, but they're not usually for chance. They're not usually for rolls. But they did just release a set last year, I believe was the Dungeons and Dragons set. And they actually had a lot of cards that were roll a dice, and if it's 2 through whatever, this is what happens. If it's this through that, this happens. And there was something that was kind of done there. Now that's I, I wouldn't like that, but I bet you they were having to use dice for things like some of our locations that are, generate a random card, roll a dice, pick a number through
Mm,
whatever, and then that corresponds to a card, and they did some stuff
right.
like that. But what I thought you were going to ask
Yes.
is when you talked about a lot of these cards being 1 to 1 of when they got released. So, fun fact: when I was at Creator Clash in New York, we got to talk to a few of the devs that were there,
Mhm.
and they said, which was really interesting and fun, that some cards that we're seeing were actually different cards. And I hate myself the fact I did not write it down or make a note of what cards, but they mentioned like there was a card that was released while we were up there that was originally one of the current cards, whether it was Wolverine or Cyclops or somebody like that.
Mhm.
So it's also funny that they've taken some cards where they built the mechanic, and whether it was Marvel, Disney, whatever, didn't like the mechanic with the character, or they just decided this didn't fit the character's personality, they've then held it. And then when another character came up and they were like, hey, what if we do this character? That sounds good for it. And so we've seen that kind of movement of the ability where they knew that that would be a good card. They just weren't sure what character to put it with. So I thought that was a really interesting thing, because I know that probably happened a lot, because you have to imagine when they started this game, they probably sat down and said, let's look at the X-Men, let's look at Spider-Man, let's look at all the stuff that everybody knows, right? And
Yeah.
start there with those characters. If you look at a lot of our base series 1 and 2 cards, a lot of them are X-Men, generic or X-Men centric characters. And so people probably had favorite characters and things, and then they went from there. So it's very
Yeah.
interesting to see as we've gotten into the Infinite, which I know is one of Ben Brody's favorite characters from a previous video, right? Like some of these not so known characters they're bringing in. It's fun to see what they're doing with them. But yeah, I just found that very interesting of the fact that they also recognize some of the abilities they knew they wanted to put in.
Yeah.
Didn't match to certain characters and needed to be moved to a different character.
It was really, really cool. Just conversationally listening to them talk about this timeline, and then they evolve and how it slowly moved from, this, printed card game
Yeah.
concept into the digital client,
Yeah.
and seeing the first ever versions of it on a tablet was really, to me, was really cool. Now I've been trying, I will say, uh, to get all of the zooms as much as possible to try and see all of the things on all of the places, like
Yeah.
School for Gifted Children as a location. They still had the dice mechanic, it
Yeah.
looks like, in here, and then you can see
This
Sentinels
was
and
the
Mystique, and
9.
there's
This
a
was the
lot of
9
cool stuff.
card location. Yeah.
Yeah,
This
this
is
is
the
the
9
9
card
card
location
location
that they
version
talk
on the
about.
screen in the YouTube video version. Yeah, it was just,
Yeah.
it was really cool kind of seeing how far the game has come
Yeah.
in such a, I mean, let's be honest here, 4 years. It seems like a long time,
Yeah.
but it's really a short period of time
Yeah, it is. And I
in a
think,
lot of ways.
and going back to the die real quick, I think the other thing, the reason why it's there is because when you play Magic, your life total is shown by a 20-sided die. When you
Mm.
play some of these other
True.
games, like dice are generally accepted in the world of card games and things. So I think that was another reason. I think they thought it would be cool, like as an aesthetic, for some of that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I've
yeah,
got
it's interesting. It's interesting to see how they kind of held it.
yeah, and I mean, and I will say they made a lot of very smart decisions very early on based on some of the concepts that
Yeah.
we could actually decipher out of these images. I mean, because there's a lot happening here. And one of the things that I found cool was, and that I'm glad that they didn't go with, because imagine this in Marvel Snap. Like, I have it on the screen here on the video side. You could have multiple potentially of the same card in a much
Mhm.
larger deck, like many other card games. Could you imagine a world where you're playing a Silver Surfer deck and you have like 6 Silver Surfers in there that all could technically buff each other up? Like, just to go back to the prior conversation,
Yeah.
like there's a lot there. And no, DefaultDan, how dare you? Do not associate me with that shore, okay? He types into the live chat here for one of our viewers. I'm rocking a Mets shirt, which I am. I am from Long Island, New York, born and bred, and I will fight you if you think Jersey is better in any way, shape, or form, including bagels. Okay? No. Do not put me into the dirty land of Durkee.
Wendy's from the New York area, so
Okay,
he was
then
also at
they're good
Creator
people.
Clash with us.
All right. Good
So,
people. Good people then. Automatically, just via default. Yes. But I am a New Yorker. And for those who do not know, from our listener side, I am born and bred there. Lived, as I said, lived in Florida, worked in Florida, in Disney, but then, life and happiness and love and marriage and kids. And now I live in Sao Paulo, Brazil. So yeah, all the way the other way.
Yeah. So I want to go back to one quick thing where you're saying like the fact you're seeing multiple of the same card played. And this was one thing that he had talked about a while back too, where when they were thinking of, and I think it may have been just like the Marvel Snap release video, when they were thinking about doing this, right? When you get into these games, so when you get into Magic, you get into Hearthstone, all these other, essentially competitors at this point. One of the big things about those games that makes it competitive and nice, yet difficult for an average player to pick up is deck building. The fact that in Magic you have 60 cards, and you can build more than 60 cards, but you usually have a 60 card minimum. You have a 4 card maximum of any card in your deck. You also have to figure in your energy and your land, so your mana base for Magic. And so when you're looking at a 60 card deck, it's a lot of math. It's I need 23 lands. Of those 23, they need to be these percentages. These cards, I need 4 of this one, but only 2 of that one and 3 of this
Yeah.
one if you want that perfect deck for tournaments and stuff. When you get to
Yeah.
Hearthstone, it gets one step easier. That one step easier is you don't have to worry about mana, because just like in Marvel Snap, you get energy every turn and your energy equates to the energy on the cards. But you can still have multiple of each card and there's still more than a 12 card deck and all of that. So what I love that they did is they said, hey, that is a barrier to the average player. You can't get a normal mobile person to go pick up Hearthstone and enjoy Hearthstone. You have to be in that world to enjoy any kind of TCG. And Snap took it one step further and said, you know what? You need 12 cards. Yeah, I don't care.
Yeah.
You're not going to do 2 of the same one. It's just 12 cards. Here's your energy. I'm going to make it as simple as possible. Yet, it can be as complicated as you want with all of these mechanics and how cards work with each other. But we're going to keep it to this base simple of 12 cards, 1 energy per turn, 6 turns. And I think that that is the reason why Marvel Snap can exist as a casual game. It can exist as a generic game that anybody can pick up and play. And it's a pro and a con. You know, going back to what we were saying earlier, there's a dip currently, which is a stabilization of players, because when it launched, you had a lot of people that enjoyed the casual. And we're getting to the point that a lot of people have completed pool 3 and now they're getting into competitive with a lot of series 5 cards and stuff. And they're starting to understand that, like, okay, maybe ladder trying to get to infinite is not my world. And so again, hopefully, crossing the fingers, we'll get some type of casual format, or conquest becomes the competitive format and ladder becomes a little more casual, whatever it may be. But yeah, I love that they really did look at this and understand all of those aspects to make it easy for anyone.
True. 100%. 100%. One thing I wanted to point out from one of these photos is kind of a sidebar conversation that doesn't necessarily have to do with the game construction. But I found it interesting, and it's on this one where they have our little green turd, Leech. And
they knew him from the beginning.
They knew from the beginning he was going to be a little green turd, as I refer to him as so eloquently. But I'm going to zoom in here on the video side, because I want to get your opinion of, is this the solution of having Leech go back to his old original format? I know it's a little blurry on our screen, but it says that Leech used to be a 4/1 that states, ignore all text on cards your opponent played this turn.
Yeah. So
do you like that or current Leech better?
I like right in between.
Okay.
Change that to next turn. And he is fixed. It's what I've been saying. It needs to happen 1 turn. You need to be leeched 1 turn and go back to normal. Therefore, he works perfectly on turn 5 like he should.
Hand or
if you
played?
get a lockjaw,
hand or played? Because this says played this turn. Because I mean, that's very, very different. That's why.
How's it different?
That's very different. Think about it. If I play a brood on the same turn, do those 2 broodlings disappear?
I'm talking about next turn. So if I changed it to ignore effects cards played by opponent next turn.
Oh, okay. Sorry. My apologies. My apologies. Yeah. So it'll be, zeroed out for the next turn.
Yeah. Anything they play next turn. And I actually like the way this is worded, because it isn't leeching their hand. It's literally just saying if they play a card next turn, their text goes away. And that way,
what's the difference between that and having a no ability card get played? Because if you play a card, it's got no ability, which is like almost the same thing, is it not?
Slightly different. So the reason why it's slightly different, playing the card is the same. The reason why it's slightly different is they don't have to touch the cards in their hand. I think the confusion would have came from turn 5, Leech coming down, hitting your hand, everything saying leeched. You play it. You play whatever card, which is leeched. Next turn, every card in your hand does not say leeched. And people would say, well, the card on the ground shouldn't be leeched anymore. I think the way it's worded right here makes perfect sense. When you play it the next turn, it would have no abilities. It would ignore all text on it. And therefore, you don't touch their hand. You're just affecting the next turn that they play. And it works on 5. If you get hit on 3 through a lockjaw or whatever, right? Or hit on 4 through a lockjaw, it feels bad for turn 5, but you still have a big turn 6 play you could make up for. I can still play a turn 5 big card with no text, but turn 6, I still have a play. But right now, the problem is turn 4, he comes down, and depending on your deck, which is a lot of decks right now, that could mess up your turn 5 and 6, and it's a feel bad. And you just scoop up the game because there's nothing you can do because the 3 cards you had, your Darkhawk, your Mystique, and your Devil Dino, all sitting in your hand, now don't work for the rest of the game. So I like the way that's worded. I just would say next turn, and he'd be perfect.
I could deal with that. I could deal with that. Good explanation. That helps.
Yeah,
that helps. It was just something I noticed, and I was like,
Yeah. The only other thing I will say about this screen before you jump to the next one, I loved how, going back to the little decisions that they made, they commented on the screen and the fact that this is a vertical screen. So if you're listening to this in podcast, rather than it being the locations being horizontal, the locations are vertical, and each player's playing on the right or the left. They said that the reason why they didn't go with this format is because right-handed people would always want to play on the right side, and left-handed people would always want to play on the left side, meaning if they're on the opposite side of the table, both of you, if you're right versus left, would want to be playing on the same side. So I thought that was like one of those things I would never think about, but it makes perfect sense of why the game is horizontal with the locations rather than vertical.
Yeah. 100%. They ended up, obviously, as we see in the final client, they stuck with this, horizontal format. And I think it's obviously, we're all enjoying it. And I don't know, like the whole feel of it, right? As we looked through all of these photos, looked through all of these evolutions of different versions of the characters and the game itself and what they decided to bring in, like one of the biggest things that I got out of it was understanding and lovingly respecting how much care they took when it came to the characters and it came to the conception, the art, the execution. Yes, they had to make all new programs to, create those effects that we know, like the 3D and the animated and the backgrounds and all these things, like the layering effects that they created for it artistically, they're beautiful. Believe me, I know how annoying it is. And that's just me trying to cut things out to make a YouTube thumbnail out of the current imagery, yet alone actually building the stuff in the game. So like I'm not that smart of a person when it comes to that type of computer programming. But what I can say is they took every detail incredibly seriously. And knowing that they relied on the collaboration with the Marvel comic artists as being a big indicator of, hey, we want to do this. How can we do this that works for you?
Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah. And I'm curious, for those watching this on YouTube after the fact, or those watching now on Twitch, so talking about these animations and these arts, right? And what we have on screen right now, if you're listening on the podcast, is the frame break mechanic. And they talk about this, like the fact that originally all the cards were square, there wasn't any kind of frame break, and then they did some, finagling with the art, and they were like, man, Thanos looks amazing when he's broken out of the frame with the Infinity Gauntlet on. But I'm curious for you guys over on YouTube, leave a comment down below. What's your favorite like upgrade on a card? Is it the frame break? Is it the animation? What's the one that like sets out to you that you like? And then from that, I'm curious, guess from your side, do you think we ever get any more different art style upgrades, or do you think right now we're locked into where we are and just infinite is infinite and things like that?
I think they leave the structure and the amount of levels. I think they update. For example, like when they changed the infinity border,
Yep.
I think they do stuff like that. I think they leave the uncommon, rare, etc. leveling system even, but
Hmm.
maybe they switch up the colors, the patterns, that kind of stuff in regards to each of them. Because
Yeah.
me personally, I'm a gold frame guy. I like my shiny logo. That's me.
Hmm.
That's what I want. I don't need the red frame. I think the gold is very regal. I think it just makes your deck pop on the battlefield. Whenever I'm building a deck that I absolutely love and I want to keep playing it regularly, I will build up all of the cards boosters to gold, to the gold level of shiny logo every time. Some
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
like red, some people just want frame break, some people will do each card based on the color pattern, the color scheme of the card itself. A lot of people will
Yeah.
do the inkified cards and they will not upgrade the borders on the inkified cards because they want a full black and white card minus the name. Everybody
Yeah.
does it different, but I'm a shiny logo guy myself.
Yeah. I want to see them add the ability, which we've asked for it a lot, and even the devs when we were talking in New York, like also agree that this is what needs to happen at some point. Not saying they're going to do it, just saying that they also agree because they play the game
Yeah.
that you should be able to change to whatever border that you want. So I don't know what that looks like, right? Is it you get all the upgrades, but you just change the border color, or do they make it to where you can actually really customize your card to say, I want this card, I want this background, I want this border, I want,
Yeah.
right? Like I want the gold background, but I want to go all the way up to the animation. But I want because it's inkified, I want the white border, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm curious at what level they get with, which I think would be awesome. I honestly, if you want to get the average player that just thinks the cards are pretty or whatever, right? Like that brings them in. I think if you want to get the super competitive person, it allows them to really customize their deck to be exactly what they want in their deck. So I think an addition like that, even though it adds nothing to gameplay, like specific gameplay mechanics, I think it's
Yeah.
something that like the community would really get behind because now you can not just put these cards in my deck with these variants. I can like really customize my cards and use my card back and all that kind of stuff to where this is my deck, right? That I'm
Yeah.
doing. So
Yeah.
I
Agreed.
would love to see that.
Fingers crossed.
So,
Fingers crossed it comes to the game relatively soon. Um,
yep.
the last real image I wanted to showcase and talk about was the fact that it used to have this, in conception, this like Mario World storyline achievement path
Yeah.
that was so convoluted. Just looking at it, it looks like, imagine looking at a map of Mario World where it's like you've got to go to all the little dots and unlock all the little lands and all of them are green, except in Mario World there's like what, 8, 10, maybe 12 at most on a land. This has like 60, and these are bright green dots, and it's just I'm glad they just went with the collection track. So what we now know
Yeah.
for your collection level, it is a
Yeah. I would
good
imagine it would be
decision.
kind of like
Good
it.
decision. Golf
Yeah.
clapping.
Yeah.
Good decision.
I could see it looking like Donkey Kong Country, where
Yeah.
this would be the full map, but you'd be zoomed in on just the little part, and then you see your little
Yeah.
guy walk across
Mm-hmm.
to the next little spot. But
Yeah.
no, I mean, here's the thing: I've seen that in a lot of the Xbox style card games. Magic had a few back in the day, and there's a bunch of them out there where you're going on your journey, and I could really see them doing that with Marvel in general. Like, here's my person that's either collecting comic books or I'm this new superhero building up my team of cards. Like, I could have seen them easily doing something like that. I'm glad they didn't because I feel like it would like cheapen the game a little bit in my mind. I
Mm-hmm.
do feel like this is a competitor to Magic Arena. I do feel like this is a competitor to Hearthstone. But if you added that mechanic, I feel like you'd take me out of that world. And Hearthstone does have a little bit of this when they do their seasons. It's not exactly like this, but they do have like a dungeon you're going through to unlock the cards for the
Yeah.
season. Or I'll say they used to. Again, I haven't played Hearthstone in several years, but I played in the first couple years of launch, and it had a lot of that mechanic. But I agree. Like it's cool to see what was in their mind and what they
Yeah.
were starting with and what they were thinking and where it is today, because a lot of the screens we're seeing once they got to the digital one looks just like what we're seeing in the game, outside of maybe a little bit better art. But
Yeah,
it is kind of cool.
it is really, really cool. It was a really cool talk. That's the only way to word it. It was a really cool talk. It's not one of
Yeah.
those learning about game mechanics type pieces. It's about, this is a background, presentation.
Yeah.
It's a how did we get to here presentation, and it's worth a watch if you've got a good,
Yeah.
hour to just look at, and you really like Marvel Snap. It's a very cool watch and gives you some great insight to the journey
Yeah.
that led to the game that you enjoy. So as someone who's
Yeah.
very passionate about the game, I know we both watched the whole thing top to bottom, and
Yep.
it was very cool. It's the only way I can word it. It was very cool. It's an hour,
Yeah.
but it was a very cool presentation, and I'm glad I watched it because I have a little bit of a different kind of positive respect
Yeah.
for the
The
journey
only
that they went on.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would add is when they were going through that, right? They talked about the fact that they started with 2 people, then they
Yeah.
added these people, then they got up to a
Hmm.
team of 50. And again, Marvel Snap was launched with a team of 50. And that's incredible to think about how smooth the launch was, how
Yeah.
big the launch was worldwide, how many users they had in the first couple days of the game. But the big thing that I think that they did so well, and they still do this, which is the friends and family. So they had these friends and family sessions where they said, "Hey, we're going to open it up to, 5 of your friends, invite them on the servers and let's test this out." And
Right.
they had people giving feedback, and they still do that. Like, that's again, when we were in New York talking to the devs, they said when new cards are coming out, they still have friends and family sessions where they test some of these new cards, some of these new locations, and that's how they kind of see this. So, yes, we had some issues that we talked about before with Kitty Pride, but if you think about how many cards they've released since go live, it's been very, very smooth. Kitty's the first card that's been broken. Kang had a couple issues, but like Kitty was the first broken card, which is actually pretty good. And they
Yeah.
caught it pretty quick, and yeah, for the most part, they dealt with it fairly quick. Now they at least know if it ever happens again, what worked and what didn't work that time. So, we'll have to
True.
see. But yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome to watch it, to learn again. If you're into building card games, video games, it's a really good watch too, because you get to see their pains and some of the stuff they did that was really good, and how it was built. Because a lot of people are like, how do you even come up with this stuff? And it's a good way to find that stuff out.
Yeah. It was very, very cool. So I'm glad I watched it. I'm glad I watched it. It was long. Not as long as the Snap.Fan Open, but it was
Yeah,
it was a long
that
presentation.
is true.
Yeah, the Snap.Fan
That
Open
is true
this past
statement.
weekend was basically in total day of about an 11-hour adventure, I want to say, roughly.
It was 10 and a half from start to finish.
Yeah, it
So
was it was a undertaking. Giant undertaking. And
yes.
extremely, I said it back then. I even said it in our private, create little caster thread and conversation. Like, it was a really smooth event from the
Yeah.
tournament side on Battlefy to in the Discord to communication within everybody involved to the broadcasters to production team, also known as you. Like, it was smooth.
Yeah.
It was really, really
Yeah.
smooth. And we had some big takeaways come out of that tournament, looking at the numbers and the data. And so I have on screen on the YouTube side, I have Snap.Fan open, and I'm using their
Yep.
tournament page, which is open to the public. It's a free thing. You can go to Snap.Fan, click on in, go down to the little hamburger over on the left-hand side, and then you'll see a tournament section, which is what I'm in
Yep.
right now. And then you can look at all of the different tournaments that they've hosted, look at all of the stats of the
Yeah, I
decks
think
as well.
yeah, so I'll preface for anybody kind of joining in that doesn't know, especially if you're listening over on the podcast. So Snap.Fan, where and that's including myself, I've been working with Sank and the team with Snap.Fan to really start to build this vision of the pro circuit of Snap, right? No,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people out there when battle mode dropped that we said, hey, we need a competitive area for people to play, and we want to create something that builds that up and allows people to start to maybe make a name for themselves, right? There's tons of streamers out there, myself and guests, we stream, we make YouTube content, but the average person, they don't do that. They don't have the time, they don't want to, whatever it may be, but they would love to participate in a tournament and get their name out there because they know they're a good player. They know they're a good deck builder, and all of that. So that's kind of the our baby of the Snap.Fan Opens is these are tournaments that are open to the public. These are not invitationals. These are not only, content creators being able to come here. This is literally anybody can sign up. We host these once a month. So make sure to check over on Snap.Fan, the website. You'll see those announcements. I wanted to kind of preface that because this was our second one, and we had 300 people sign up for this. We had, I think, 286 or 280 something actually check in to the tournament to play. So again, some people signed up, didn't show up. That's fine. And it was a huge tournament. We played it on Saturday. And the other thing I will make sure people understand is this is a long tournament. It is 8 rounds of Swiss. And after the 8 rounds of Swiss, it is a cut to top 8. So this is not I'm just going to go play for an hour and see where I go in a tournament. This is an all-day event, which was fun.
For the community who has never done a tournament before, you're not talking about cheese, right?
I'm not. So Swiss means each round you will be paired based on your current rank, your current record, and you will get paired to your next opponent. There's some stuff in the background that also looks at tiebreakers, win percentage of your opponents, so that you are paired against someone that makes sense to be paired against through this, but you will work your way up. And then at the end of these 8 rounds, meaning every round you get paired with another random person, and through a website, it will let you know who that is and there's a chat so you can contact them. At the end of that, whoever has the top 8 records, so the top 8 people will then go into a bracket of those top 8 to find out who the one winner is of that. And again, the beauty of this is the Snap.Fan Open tournaments are going to lead into I believe they're branding it as a world championship in January.
Yep.
And this is also teaming up with a couple other people like the Snap Clash guys, as well as the Battle Arena guys, for other spots to make it into this world champion. And I believe when you go to that tournament, you can also see some of the Snap Battle tournaments standings and deck lists and stuff in there too. So it's not just the Snap.Fan ones. We are looking at, and that tournament is about 100-person tournament every single month, or I think it's twice a month actually. So we're trying to get as much data as we can in the tournament world. So this is specific to battle mode and tournament and not ladder, because the deck that works in ladder, aka Galactus, probably doesn't work over in battle mode. So even though we did have one good Galactus player. So
yeah, we had someone who had really good locations and a really good Galactus deck in general. And I wanted to talk about, some of the decks that were used that made it to the top 8. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the card stats and what we refer to as the meta stats in regards to what worked and what didn't during the event, because there were some really big surprises going into the top 8. For example, having the only undefeated deck in 8 rounds not be Shuri Red Skull, but it was a Hitmonkey
or Thanos
bounce deck. Yeah, or Thanos. It wasn't Thanos either. It was a Hitmonkey bounce deck.
Yeah, it's crazy because if we look at Battle Arena had a tournament the weekend before, and all top 4 of the decks were Thanos. I think the tournament before that, 6 of the top 8 were Shuri. So this time around, we expected to see a lot of Shuri, and we saw a lot of Shuri in the tournament. But yeah, to your point, the only undefeated deck after the 8 rounds of Swiss was a Hitmonkey deck. It was a bounce deck. It had Hitmonkey, it had Beast, Quinjet. I think it was She-Hulk at the top end of that, Moon Girl. Like, it had some really spicy cards, and they actually went all the way to the finals with this deck. And it's just insane that how good and how consistent the deck was when you see that there were Thanos decks and there were Shuri decks and all of that in there.
Yeah. It was very cool to see. As someone who was commentating on it, it was very cool to see. Very, very cool to see.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
the decks that did very well also, of course, as expected, different variations of what we'll call the Shuri deck, which will
Yep.
be not really important anymore. Post probably almost the release of this podcast.
Yeah.
The Lockjaw deck with Thanos that did the best consisted of Leech, no surprise,
Yeah.
and
Leech
Kang.
Leech was Leech was a very difficult card. So the finals ended up, and again, if you want to see this, if you want to see the VOD of the entire tournament, you can definitely go over to Snap.Fan's Twitch. And then we'll probably have some YouTube videos and stuff coming out pretty soon where we chop all that up for you. But the VOD is up there right now if you want to check it out. But yeah, so that Leech card was just detrimental against the Hit Monkey deck in the final round.
Yeah,
Leech coming down was so strong against that deck. Kang coming down, not just on turn 6, was actually really good for checking stuff. We saw a few Kangs throughout the tournament doing checks on 4 and 5. And so it was really crazy just to see how people were playing. But I want to talk about the deck right below that one.
I do too. On screen.
So
yeah, just to give context for the audio listeners, the only 8-0 deck in the first 8 rounds was the Hit Monkey deck. There were different constructions of decks that went 7-1. 2 of them were variations on the same Red Skull Shuri deck. We just talked about the Lockjaw deck that had Leech and Kang. And then out of left fucking field,
top 4
deck, exactly, and almost made it to the finals. We had a Cloak and Dagger move deck.
Did this one have bounce in it too? If you scroll over,
no, it had Shuri.
Shuri was the awkward card
it was
that I feel
Shuri
like could have
move deck.
I feel like Shuri wasn't needed, but throwing down Shuri with Vision and throwing down Shuri with Magneto actually won a couple matches within there. But yeah, there were, or even Shuri into Miles seemed pretty strong too after you move something. But the thing is, I feel like Move is just one of those very predictable decks in general. But the way they piloted this deck, the way they were able to do some of the crazy stuff with Cloak and really just pumping up some of those cards, you have to think about, if we look at the top 8 decks, I don't think there's a single Killmonger there. So your Human Torch, I mean, he's just getting big. You're gonna have to Shang-Chi him. Okay, you had one Killmonger, but he didn't face Iron Man. I think he was down in the bottom of the bracket. But yeah, so like they did some cool stuff with the move deck, and I was surprised and I was excited to see that the top 4, the top 8 that really truly got in there. There really was a variety of decks. We weren't just watching Shuri the whole time. And throughout the tournament, we were able to find some really spicy builds that were there to showcase on stream.
Yeah, one of the ones that I really enjoyed, I am trying to find it out of this group here, was seeing the Shuri Red Skull. Here it is, the one by J.N. Zook, which was a Shuri Red Skull variation that consisted of Claw as the other 5. A lot of people were playing Captain Marvel or Vision as that other big 5-drop, and they played Claw. And I liked how they had even piloted the Claw, because it happened during my section of the broadcast. And they just held on to it until like round 4 or 5, and then would just bam, throw it out there at the very last second to try to steal cubes. And I love that tactic in battle mode, and it's something that Kang organically lets you do, which is that element of surprise. But I speak to it all the time, that it's so important in a battle mode deck to not reveal all of your cards like right off the bat on game 1. You want to sometimes go ahead and retreat, give them the 1 cube of, that retreat so you can not show every part of your hand right away. You
Yeah.
want
I
that
had
element to surprise later on too.
yeah, at Creator Clash I actually had because at Creator Clash you got to bring 2 decks. And then when you played, you picked one of the 2 decks. And my very first match against Specimen, round 1, he literally didn't play anything. So we went 3 turns of me playing stuff and him not playing stuff. And again, turn 1, maybe he didn't have a 1 drop. Turn 2, maybe he didn't have a 2 drop. Turn 3, he doesn't play anything. I'm like, he's just seeing what deck I'm playing. Because we had open deck list, but he didn't, you don't know what deck they picked. I was like, man, but it's smart in something like battle mode to give up 1 cube if you're trying to figure out what they're playing, right? And I'm not saying you do that every single game, to start out.
Please, no, people, let's not make that a thing. Okay. Otherwise, now we can blame DefaultDan for that if that starts to become a thing, because he's put it out there into the universe. As someone who's, huge in the tournament scene, we now have to blame you for the skip on 3, skip first 3 turns. Thanks. Great job.
Yeah.
Great job. You're so healthy.
But it was it was interesting in that just because we had open deck lists, so he was able to tell what deck I was playing. If you're in closed deck list, I mean, it may help you if you see armor on 2, like we've talked about before, right? Armor on 2, it's a Shuri deck. That doesn't always mean the case, but there are some cards, and maybe right away with the hand that I have, I can't beat Shuri. There's no reason to reveal more information for them. But yeah, anyway, kind of going into that, it was just an interesting kind of concept, and we saw that a couple times too, where when you're playing, you're deciding when you want to give them information or not.
Yeah. And once you have said information, it's very valuable, obviously, but the piece of information that I thought was probably most interesting overall was looking at the stats at the end of the tournament and looking at, okay, who played what deck the most, whether it's the most successful or just the overall highest frequency of deck. Now, I know you made this caveat in the Snap.Fan broadcast. I'll also make the similar caveat here that these numbers are based on number of total appearances over 8 rounds. So this is including all of that. So whether you played 1 game and then said, well, I lost, I'm bouncing, or something happened, or you played all 8 rounds and you did well all 8 rounds, or you did all 8 rounds and you lost all 8 rounds, it doesn't matter. It's about scene percentage.
Yeah.
The number one.
And typically,
sorry, go ahead.
Well, and just the one little slight caveat with that as well is the typical way that works is if somebody loses 2 rounds, they tend to drop out of a tournament. Now, one of the big things with the Snap.Fan Open is we do have season points, and as long as you complete 4 rounds, you get 1 season point. So at the end, there is a way to make it into the invitational based on your season points. So keep that in mind. But
this is true.
Yeah, so there's some of these decks, if you go all the way to the bottom and things like that, for people, like, you have to remember that some of these decks literally played 1 or 2 rounds and then bounced. So their win percentage, their scene percentage, things like that are so low because of that fact. Compared to the Shuri Red Skull decks that probably played 6 to 8 rounds because they were in contention for the top 8. So we're going to see them a little bit more. But that also means the deck is probably better, because if we're seeing them more, it means they're probably winning a lot of their matches, which goes back to win percentages and things like that.
Right. Couple of big things from this one particular tournament that jumped out at me. Okay, so the number 1 overall deck was a Thanos Lockjaw deck, and that doesn't surprise me. The number 2 deck being the Shuri clone deck, the Shuri Red Skull deck, again, does not surprise me whatsoever. It's once we started getting past that we really start seeing the very widespread, right? We obviously really start seeing the very widespread of a giant drop off, because I'm not going to count the uncategorized decks, decks that didn't quite fill into the meta categories based on certain card combos, or you're just missing one of, ignore that, right? Thanos Lockjaw was 20% of the decks that were seen. Shuri was 18% of the decks that were seen. So 38% already gone. So a third of the decks you say, it's going to be one of these 2. After that, then you start seeing your Darkhawk, your Hitmonkey Sarah, Doomwave was making a very prominent presence on number of times seen, specifically, which I'll
Mm-hmm.
come back to. And the one I want to talk about is my big, big old friend, Master Mold, coming on down
Yeah.
as one of the top 10 scene percentage decks, because I'm so happy to see Master Mold and Ronin get the love that it deserves, and more so in the sense that the Master Mold Ronin deck, even though it was seen less, for the amount of times that it was seen, it won more than the Thanos Lockjaw deck. It is one of the top 5-ish decks overall, based on the number of the win percentage of the deck. And I think it is only the beginning of the era of Ronin in the tournament scene. I said it when the second Master Mold come on out. I'm going to stand on
Yeah.
that hill, and I'm going to die on that hill, no matter how small you think it is. I think Master Mold is one of the best tournament cards by a mile, and the beginning of him is only just starting now, because you saw Dara took down a tournament as well with his Master Mold deck, and you're going to start seeing him more and more and more.
Yeah, so I will admit in some instances, right, Master Mold's going to be very, very pivotal in the deck. So if you think of like a Hit Monkey deck, throwing cards in their hand is really going to hurt when they try to pick up cards like Kitty Pride or things like that when there's no room in their hand. So I would agree with you on the fact that there is some play there. I will caveat, if you're listening to this on the podcast, some of those scene percentages of Master Mold is, 3%. Doomwave is 3%. Hit Monkey is 3%.
Yes.
So there
Yes.
is some like caveats to that, but I will agree the win percentage on that deck was very high. It's almost 60%. So
Yeah.
it is a deck that's good, and I do think that there is a chance that it can stick around because of the rise, and we will have a rise back of Thanos. So with the Shuri nerf coming, Thanos was the biggest deck played here. It got in first place. I mean, it will continue to stick around. And with the draw sequences that the Thanos deck has with the stones, flooding them with a couple sentinels can definitely help you out. So I do agree there that there is some decks around that. I think that Master Mold is a card that can disrupt some of the decks out there. So it will be interesting to see what happens as the tournament expands. I think the other side of this is, which I'm sure we're going to be talking about next week, the OTA changes that are about to start coming. It'll be interesting to see what's
Yeah.
going to happen in these tournaments when every week we've got some card changing. Now, I don't think, and this is my opinion, and again, next week we'll talk more about these kind of things, but I don't think that the OTA changes are going to be anything dramatic. I think if I had to guess, 70% of the changes are going to be trying to bring up cards that are not being played. I think it's going to be very
I agree.
rare when they try to quote unquote kill a card. So I think it's going to be more of trying to get cards more used, which could really affect some of these decks. So I was excited. And again, like you mentioned, all these stats are up on the Snap.Fan website. You can see the meta stats and you can see the card stats. So if you want to jump to that one just real quick, I just want to point out what was cool when we were talking on air during the tournament. I mean, the number one played card, the number one seen card was Shang-Chi, meaning everybody was ready for the Red Skull Shuri deck. You had She-Hulk, which was the Red Skull Shuri deck, Lizard, Sunspot. That's all part of the Shuri deck. So you either had Shuri or you brought something to counter the Shuri deck. And I just thought that was a really cool figure in there. And there's a lot of other cards that kind of pop up through this list that are interesting to see. But we are starting to see some of the cards we were seeing a lot, like Darkhawk, uh, not being up in the top of this list, right? I mean, it's midway
Yeah.
or so, but like a lot of the cards that we saw a month ago aren't at the top of this list anymore. Zabu, Darkhawk, the dominating Silver Surfer, things like that. So it'll be interesting to see every week and new cards coming out and the Shuri nerf and whatever, like what cards are going to kind of pop up in each of these tournaments. And so, yeah, I love what Sank's doing with all this data. Like I said, you can see this tournament, you can see last month's open, and you can see some of the battle arena tournaments and what they're seeing on their side. But yeah, lots of great stats when you're looking at building decks, especially for battle mode. So keep in mind, these are battle mode. So you're going to see Galactus probably towards the bottom in a lot of cases of these lists. But it's just really cool to see what people are bringing. And again, looking at some of these decks, the thing I thought was really cool was I think the Hitmonkey deck, outside of Hitmonkey, I think it's all like Series 3, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's
I
all
mean
Series 3.
that's a very practical deck for a quote unquote new just Series 3 complete or even part almost complete player can play that deck. So yeah, I really like being able to analyze this data, and we'll have this data every month. And at the end of this podcast or this stream or this YouTube video, I've got a little bit of announcement that guest doesn't even know about. So we'll get
Oh,
to that in a minute, though.
you're springing something on me? Great.
I am. It's
Okay.
related to Snap.Fan, but
Okay.
so overall, man, I know you had fun on the stream itself. You got to cast. It was your first casting during the tournament, official casting of a tournament. You did a great job with Nile during your segment, as well as you came back for the after show with myself, you, and Pulse. Just having fun. But what'd you think, man? What'd you think? I mean, that's 10 and a half hours, and you were there from start to finish, plugging up cards on the screen so people could see them and talk about them. But what'd you think?
Honestly, from a broadcaster standpoint, I had an absolute blast. I loved being able to think and talk about Marvel Snap without the pressure of playing Marvel Snap at the same time. It's very different, being able to have that live reaction, thinking if I were in their shoes, what would I be doing, trying to think what the other opponent is doing as well, and just give that consistent feedback back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It was a really, really fun moment for me because as someone who's grown up around and in entertainment, this has been something that I've always, wanted to do in some way, shape, or form. The podcast, I've done a podcast in the past previously and I kind of shelved it, but the fact that we got to bring it back because I love being able to talk the game and talk about the things that I'm passionate about is a lot of fun. And then being able to do it now in a broadcast, competitive style setting was so much fun. From a completely selfish standpoint. It was absolutely a blast. I am 100% in for doing it as often as possible because it was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. I cannot wait for May, June, July, and all the other fun ones that'll come down the pipeline because I know this will not be my last. I will make sure of that and I will seek it out personally because I just had a great time. I had a great time from the production side, dealing with the cards. Like I was talking to you afterwards briefly and you know, mentally, it was you have to be so active, like full on, because I'm watching the Discord and then I'm watching the live chat, then I'm watching the live feed, which is different than the live chat because the live chat is seeing a 3-minute delay. And then I'm dealing with the card prompts, which I'm activating myself manually. Every time a card popped up onto the screen to show you what the card was, that was me on another system. So going back and forth and then keeping the communication and updating the stream titles and doing like the whole 11 hours I was like plugged in. I was talking about it on stream this morning that I was just like, it took me an hour to fall asleep after we had stopped talking that night. It still took me an hour to fall asleep afterwards because I was just so like in the zone, still active, brain fried because it's different than streaming and gaming. It's a completely different world. It's production. It's completely different. And I'm honored to have been a part of it. It really was. It was great. I can't wait to do it again. Knock on wood.
Yeah, we're gonna hopefully figure out the delay of chat and all of that. So that's my number one goal for next month. So hopefully we'll have that resolved so we can interact with chat real time, but still have the game itself delayed. So the streamers are essentially, or the casters are essentially watching a delayed game. So we're gonna figure that out. That is our number one thing. to do. But yeah, I mean, it was a ton of fun. And again, I love everybody that showed up. We had well over 1,000 people throughout the day popping in. I think our peak was around 380 people based on what Twitch is telling us, and we averaged over 100 people the whole time. And I know that's
Yeah.
not to the levels of some of the other big streamers out there, but honestly, guys, like for our very first
Yeah.
stream on a brand
Premiere.
new Twitch channel, everything, it was huge. And again, love the community for it and can't wait to have these every month, and more people are going to find it. More people are going to either watch it or participate in it.
Yep.
And again, that's the other side of it, right? We also had almost 300 people participating in it. So while they're participating, they're probably not watching the stream. So, a
Yeah.
lot of little things, but I definitely think if we can get the real-time interaction with chat, that'll be a big thing there. But yeah. Anything
Yeah.
else you want to add about the Snap.Fan Open before
I mean,
I throw out a little bit of news there?
Yeah, go ahead and throw out the news. I think we have definitely exhausted
All right.
the topics of the surprise topics and the planned topics,
All
including the
right.
pushed away topics.
Yeah.
So what's your announcement
So
concern? Because I legitimately don't know what he's about to say right now.
yeah.
It could be that I'm having a third kid. I have no idea. I'm not. But it could
So
be.
so
Let's find out.
guest,
What's up?
I'm starting my own podcast. No, I'm just playing. No,
Son of
so
a
so when it
Ass
comes
hat.
to Snap.Fan, right? We have the Snap.Fan Twitch channel, and we don't want to just do this once a month. We don't want to only have that Twitch channel live once a month and not see you guys anytime between that. So I've been talking to some of the guys, and we are working through it, and potentially next Wednesday we are going to start doing, maybe we're going to do a trial run next Wednesday, a Wednesday night Snap. I don't want to say battles because that's another branded thing, but on Wednesday nights, we're going to start doing like a 4-round Snap tournament. This won't be like a cut to top 8 or anything like that. It's just going to be 4 rounds based on what your record is at the end of the night. You can win some season points, and we'll have some casters, so random casters coming on to hang out, talk about it. So a little
Nice.
less formal than
Cool.
the once a month tournament, but we want to start to create like a weekly thing. So again, we'll have more details on times and things like that. But I come from Magic, and when it comes to Magic, we love our Friday Night Magic, we love our Monday Night Modern, things like that. So what we want to do is start to build something like that. I can't say prizes, anything like that to start. Hopefully we can figure out what that's going to look like over time, but we definitely want to get that set up to where we're doing 1 season points. So if you can't make those Wednesdays, and again, you do have Snap Clash and you have Battle Arena to also try to win your invitation to the championship, this is a way you can get some season points. So more details to come, but you guys are hearing it first here.
Hey.
You're hearing it second on the YouTube and the podcast.
On the actual release, not the live presentation. Yeah.
And then you're probably hearing it third through your friend who's telling you about it as they're going to be competing. So we'll get more details around that, but the idea is it's more of a casual 4 rounds. We'll pair you up based on your standings and all that kind of stuff. So you'll actually be able to compete against people that are around your level each Wednesday to try to go 4-0 to get some season points. So loving it. And again, like I mentioned, we're going to have some other casters. So I'm sure we'll have you on some of these Wednesdays, helping cast some of these games, some of these rounds, and just having fun with it. So really want to build, again, that community. It's all about the community. We want to make some places to do it. And again, Snap Clash has tournaments going on as well daily that you can do. So I want to give them a big shout out. Wiggins over there in the chat as well as, again, Battle Arena has some monthly weekend tournaments. But if you can't make that 10.5 hours, here's a good Wednesday night. Come hang out, play some Snap with the community. So
cool. Very, very cool. That's exciting. I had no idea about that. So I like that.
Yeah,
look at this. You're getting world premiere news here on the Snapback podcast, and I'm completely okay with that.
And we're going to see how it goes. So not this Wednesday, the next Wednesday, and I'll just throw out a date in case you're listening to it on the podcast or something like that. Looking at the 26th, so April 26th, it'll be that night, probably. Again, I normally start streaming around 8 p.m. Eastern. So somewhere around in there, as we get solidified on details, I'll shoot that out to you guys, but on the Discord and Twitter and all that good stuff. But that'll be held over on that Snap.Fan Twitch. We got to get it affiliated, guys. We've got enough follows. We got enough average viewers, even if we literally get one person for every stream until the end of the month. Yeah. Because you guys killed it during the tournament. Yeah, but I got to get some time over there, and we feel like that is a really good use of the channel. Again, supporting the community, building it up. So, yeah.
Snap off.
Snap off.
Snap
Wednesday
off.
night snap off.
You heard it here. That's my nomination. We'll talk to those that make the decisions. Yeah. All right. So
if anybody has any ideas, chat it. Chat here, and or if you're watching this on YouTube, comment down below. What do you think we should call Wednesday nights? And yeah, are you going to be participating? That's the other question.
DefaultDan, where can we find you?
All right, you can find me twitch.com, or it's not twitch.com. I'm so bad at this.
Can't find his ass there.
/ DefaultDan, or youtube.com/DefaultDan. That's where you can find me, as well as just hanging out with this guy here. Like I said, and guess that at the beginning of the stream, if you want to see these things live, come over to twitch.tv/DefaultDan on Mondays. And you could be lucky enough, because this Wednesday we'll be doing it live again. So
this is true. This is true. And as for myself, for those who do not know, once again, my name is Guest, also known as ItsGuestGaming. You could find me 4 days a week over at twitch.tv/ItsGuestGaming, as well as on YouTube, Twitter, Reddit, Instagram, all of the above. You all know the routine at this point. So thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone who was watching here on the live broadcast on DefaultDan's channel, and to all of you listeners on the podcast and viewers here on YouTube. Thank you for your consistent support. Tell your friends, tell everybody, hit that like button, subscribe, do all of the above. I appreciate every single bit of it. Thank you so much. So this is your moment. This is that outro moment, man. This is your moment.
I haven't even
DefaultDan,
about this.
Say goodbye, DefaultDan.
See you guys later. Is that better?
It sounded like you were losing air. Like,
see you guys later.
See, now you just sound like exasperated Thanos when he's like,
"This is inevitable. Right. It's inevitable. Yeah. I'm never gonna make one of these good."
Yeah, it's never.
You guys leave a comment on what my outro should be next time. I will read off the top one.
Yeah, because
how about that?
Leaky tire is not cutting it.